All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to call to order the Stakeholder Advisory Committee for the Whatcom County Criminal Justice Project. It is December 15th at 10:02 a.m. and we are meeting virtually. And welcome everybody. Thanks for making time. I know December can be a very challenging and busy month, but you're here and I really appreciate it and the work that we're doing. So without any further ado, I will turn it over to Holly to kind of set the tone for our meeting today. Holly?
Great. Thanks, Barry. Okay, here we are. As Barry said, thank you all so much for showing up. You've been awesome. And I know that we've been just sending you, it's like a fire hose of information and of, just edits to the document, trying to incorporate everything we're getting from folks. I'm also really thankful we have Jennifer Moon here on the call because she's been the primary author of the report, and so she's been working on incorporating your feedback as she gets it. So thank you everybody who's been giving feedback. Super helpful, super insightful. Again, if I think everybody's renamed, or if you haven't, please do so. I know Scott's going to do it in a few minutes. Let's go ahead and flip to the next screen and we'll get started. Nice. All right. So today, exciting day. The two main pieces of work we're going to try and finalize today are the vision, value, and goals, and the needs, gaps, and recommendations. And we've had a lot of input on that. A couple of subcommittees have met, and Marty's been working on just really incorporating stuff that has come from our meetings, from the written comment, trying to make sure we've got the revisions that are reflecting the input we've received. So we're going to test those out today and then really have as much time as possible for discussion to see if we can really get as close to a common understanding of what we're going to be recommending here. All righty. So next, that's our goal for today. If you noticed in the last email that Kathy sent out, when we started putting the presentation together over the last couple of days, we realized that the flow of the agenda didn't work. So we've revised the flow that I think is going to work better. Marty's going to offer a recap of the public input. We're going to just take maybe 10 minutes to hear general impressions that folks are hearing from that. And then we're going to move into just chunking through the proposed revisions that are based on, like I said, the subcommittee's work, and then Marty and the planning team and myself trying to incorporate that into the next level of this draft. And then we'll close it out with some final announcements and next steps. So again, just raise your hand to be recognized to speak. Remember that we really want to aim for, when we're engaging, staying on track. I know that there's, of course, a lot of thoughts and feelings that people have, but just as much as we can use our time productively. And I see, and so we're going to, thank you, Atul, I see your hand. We're going to just, I'm going to go through the process overview. And again, we're going to try and just maximize our focus. So process overview, we are here on meeting number 8, discussing the public input. Next slide. Okay, and Marty is about to jump in with the presentation. So Atul, I see your hand. Do you have a question right now, real briefly? I know you often share your thoughts about the process. So is that your hope today to share that?
No, I just was letting you know and folks know that I had 4 or 5 attempts to get on, and I just got on. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. So maybe if there's anybody else, it could have just been me. Just wanted to make sure you know. Okay.
I'm glad you're here. Yay. Okay. I'm going to look at the attendees list. Caleb. Okay.
Meanwhile, I did have trouble signing in as well. Maybe it just wasn't you, Atul. Just saying.
Okay.
Yeah, I did as well.
All right. Well, thanks for everybody who made it on. And Kathy, let's just keep our eyes open for the attendees. I will as well. So if we have other people who need to get promoted, we can do that. Okay. Are you guys ready? Right on.
All right.
Hey, Marty, you're up.
Thanks, everybody, for your perseverance in getting here this morning. I'm going to go through very quickly the results that we got from reports from the VITA agency, TVA. They did listening sessions and informal interviews and provided 2 reports, which you all should have received a link to. Those live on the SAC website. And so I'm going to talk about those results very briefly. And then I'm also going to just touch on the town hall results, which I know we've talked about before, but just a little reminder on that. All right. Next slide, please. Get mine in sync. There we go. So I'm going to just start with the listening sessions and the interviews. And TVA reached out to tribal nations, immigrant communities, and formerly incarcerated people and their families. And the total number of participants from these different communities is listed here. The numbers are quite small, really. So we have to keep that in mind as we interpret the results, that we're dealing with a small sample. Next one. And these are some of the key insights that came from the listening session participants. And I'll just pause here for a second so you can read these. And I do hope you all had the reports and had a chance to browse through them to get more of this. So we've just pulled the key insights. And the next slide has some more of those additional insights. And these are on page 10 of the engagement report. Right. I'm counting on you to be speed readers on those 2. Let's go to the next one. I want to switch now to the survey. And the survey was developed by TVA and the planning team. And they did recruitment using a whole lot of different methods, online ads, through Facebook, social media, emails, posters around town and in the county. And they collected survey responses from October 25th to November 18th. And the final tally of valid responses was 1,704. So we'll look at the results from those. The TVA highlighted polarized views among respondents regarding their feelings of safety and beliefs about whether they'll be treated fairly in the criminal legal system. And this slide shows the percentage of respondents who agreed or strongly disagreed with the statements about feeling safe. That's in the blue. And then trusting the criminal legal system in the greener color. The report highlighted that those who tend to feel safe and those who tend to distrust the criminal legal system will treat them fairly, want more community resources going toward behavioral health services. Those who do not feel safe in the community and people who tend to trust the criminal legal system to be fair feel that more law enforcement and investment in jail facilities are needed. So our task here, I guess, is to find the path, the middle path, the path that incorporates all of this. I think that's what we've been working toward. I want to just here highlight the alignment with the SAC vision statement. People were asked about whether the vision statement matched their own vision. And I just need to note here that the survey only presented the first part of the vision statement. It didn't, in the like when they printed it out, it didn't include those parts about prevention, rehabilitation, or accountability, which are in the full version of the vision, which we'll be looking at very shortly here. So alignment with the vision statement was much higher for those who feel safe in the community compared with those who do not. That's another interesting finding. Let's go to the next one. This one is a bit of a complicated chart looking at the value statements, but I felt like it would be helpful to compare here how TVA the survey respondents ranked the value statements in terms of importance or priority compared with the results from the SAC and IPRTF poll that you did in October, where you were asked for how much you agreed with each of the value statements. Again, I want to point out that TVA had to shorten or abbreviate each of the statements. So what you see here are how the statements were presented in the survey.
Marty, could you remind me what TVA means?
The VITA agency. That's the consultants who did this community engagement work. All right, so we're not exactly comparing apples to apples here, but we're pretty close. So the comparison indicates that if you look at the top row, protecting public health and safety is the #1 priority of everybody. High level of agreement there. There's also a high level of agreement with the statement about evaluating if current programs, interventions, and processes are working as intended. Using the one that's second on the list, using evidence-based decision-making was a high priority for the survey respondents, but the level of agreement among SAC and IPRTF members wasn't similarly high. Fourth one down, early interventions was ranked 4th highest priority for the survey respondents, but interestingly, it was mostly those who felt they would be unfairly treated by the criminal legal system and who feel safe in their community. SAC members had a high level of agreement with this value. I should have pointed out that when we had this value statement in the SAC and IPRTF survey, it was combined as one statement with the it was a longer statement that included saving money over the long term. It was a big TVA pulled these apart, and that's interesting because saving money over the long term wound up being the lowest priority for the survey respondents, while early interventions is high. Our SAC and IPRTF rating was 94% for that combined statement. Atul, did you want to ask or say something else here?
Yeah, I had a question regarding a previous slide where there was a bunch of percentages and they didn't add up to 100. I think it was like the 3rd slide, but we can come back to that. Why don't you continue, and then when other people are asking questions, we can go back to that slide.
Okay, yeah, let me just whip through the last couple slides here. Just a couple
Well,
more.
could you click the lower hand icon? So that's kind of distracting to have that up all the time.
Yep.
I had raised it for that specific question, Barry, and yes, I will lower it now.
Thanks. We're going to have time for everybody. As soon as Marty's done presenting, we'll hear from everybody, any questions, and we can go back and forth on the slides. Marty, do you want to finish on this slide? I think you had a couple more to go.
Yeah, I do. So I was just going to say that SAC members had a high level of agreement with the making decisions that reflect community priorities. That was another one that we ranked really high at 94%. Let's just move on to the next one. And this is a summary of key insights from the survey report. So investing in incarceration prevention was high. Some investment in jail facilities was high, and the majority prioritized improving behavioral health services in the community, in jail, and post-incarceration when people are re-entering the community from jail. And this is just a reminder about the results from the town hall, a summary of some of the higher level results here. We had a fair bit of focus on the need for a new jail, statements that from people feeling like Bellingham was less safe, and talking about the need for accountability, punishment to reduce crime being a deterrent. And then 8 people prioritized the need for community-based services. So now we have time for discussion of these results. And let's see, Atul had a question about the third slide, not adding up to 100. Which one is the third?
There was a slide where you had blue and green. And I'm just trying to figure out the math here. So is the bottom 100 and the top
It's 99, and it was like 99 and 101, I think.
Okay, so
rounding error.
yeah, and this is a very interesting slide, and I'm just trying to understand it more deeply. So I'm wondering if you could try to help me with that.
Yeah, this slide are the responses to the question where people were asked their level of agreement with the statement, "I feel safe in my community." And then the second part is the statement, "I feel like I trust that I will be treated fairly by Whatcom County's criminal legal system." And so the percentages are the people, the first one, feel safe in the community, is how many people agreed or strongly agreed with that. Don't feel safe was how many people disagreed or strongly disagreed. And no opinion was neither agree nor disagree. Same deal on the feeling trust. So then on this slide, I was also pointing out that these feelings people have, which TVA refers to as the psychographic part of the report, if you read it in there, that those feelings are aligned with their responses, with people's responses in the rest of the survey. They were really pulling that out. So that's why I highlighted it here.
Okay, and that math isn't actually presented on this slide, but it's you're just sharing based on some correlations that TVA did, based on looking at how people in a particular.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. That
Yeah.
helped.
And I'm sorry, I wasn't clear.
No, it's a lot of information. It's hard to say it all. Thank you.
Okay, so other comments? Yeah, just your general reflections and observations of any of the data that we've got to look at here. We just wanted to give time for folks to reflect. Anything that jumped out at you or that you found interesting? Yeah, Michael?
I'm going to anticipate the presentation later on. I actually found these results to be like crystal clear and easy to interpret. And I'll talk about that at length. This seems to encapsulate exactly what I've seen over the last decade in terms of what you hear people saying and why they're saying it. So it was, to me, very confidence building to see that my impressions and my own kind of model of how people were thinking about the issue really matched up with the data.
Yeah, thank you. Brel?
Yeah, I really appreciated reading some of the report around the listening sessions that were done. I understand that it was a pretty small pool of people, but just the fact that there were, you know, some good representation of folks that have been formerly incarcerated or families of those who have, and just feel like there's just so much really really important insight in that part of the report around what are the things that are actually going to reduce recidivism and incarceration. And really, I mean, interesting to see the opinion mirrored in some of the jail survey results around more than building a new jail. What's going to be helpful are, expanded mental health and substance abuse treatment support, and support in reentry, as well as prevention stuff. So just, yeah, that was really reaffirmed from the people that I feel like are some of the best experts to listen to in this particular effort.
Thanks, Brill. I want to also just thank all of you in the SAC, because you had flagged, Brill, yourself and others had flagged the importance of getting input from folks who are in the jail, folks who are working at the jail, folks who've been incarcerated, the families of people who'd been incarcerated. Like, all that research was done, that extra research was done. And we asked TVA to do that, really do that outreach because of all of your requests that we get that. And I also just want to take a moment to give a shout out to David Goldman, who just yay for you for doing all that work with the jail and jail staff. That was so excellent and so useful. So thanks.
Just really quickly, I just forgot to say one thing. I don't know if TVA is still doing more outreach to try to talk to more people that are formerly incarcerated, just to expand that pool a little bit. But if they are, I'm happy to help with that outreach. Yeah.
Thanks.
That's a nice offer, Brill. I think they wrapped it up. And I meant to say that what you got were draft reports, and they're finalizing those reports now. And part of what they're doing that none of us have seen yet is there were people who made written comments on the surveys, and they are analyzing that qualitative data, that written data that people sent in. So we'll get to see that. But I think they're done doing their outreach for now. The reports we should be able to get those final reports to you early next week.
Great. Okay, are we ready to move on? We have a lot more to go today, so unless there's anything else, yeah, go ahead, Peter.
It just occurs to me, this is a little embarrassing, but it occurs to me that we have not surveyed victims of crime in any significant way. Does anybody else see that as a gap, or do we feel like we've covered that?
Well, I'll tell you, I do want to say that that was something that the planning team also noticed, Peter, when we were working on that survey, the community survey. That's part of why "Do I Feel Safe in My Community" was added to that survey. So we didn't ask, and were you a victim of crime? But that's actually why that question was stuck in, was for that reason. So yes, is it one could argue certainly that more information would be valuable though. Yeah. Atul, since I've heard from you, I'm going to jump to some other folks, and then I'll swing back to you again. So Sheriff Elfo, you're up.
Yeah, I just have the same concern as Peter does with the victims of crime, and it's not just what the community senses, it's people that have actually been victimized, and they see their offenders out, the people who have offended them and harmed them, out in jail in quick order, or not even booked. We got to the point at one point we're not even able to book people for residential burglary because there's no room at the jail. So that should be a driving force as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Cliff?
Okay, I would just like to say, first of all, yeah, I agree. We haven't really looked into the people that are victims. And the other thing I'd like to remind people is that most of the people that are in jail don't think they need to be there. They think that they've been wronged a lot of times. I worked as a deputy sheriff and I worked in corrections. I dealt with these people. I've also dealt with these people on my own, outside of my work, outside of being paid, outside of, I've brought in homeless people. Maya knows that I dealt with one of her clients at one point with somebody I didn't really know, but he called and asked for help and I tried to help him. So I think we have to be careful of the perspective that we come from. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. I do want to just also keep everybody's awareness of the fact that both the town hall and the survey, I would wager, had people who were also victims of crime. We just don't know how many, right? We have no idea of the people who were at the town hall or who responded to this survey. But it certainly got the impression that some of them had, from at least from facilitating the town hall.
And adding to that, just one thing that I didn't say before is that the survey and the listening sessions and interviews were all self-selected. People chose to do those. They were not a random sample in any way. And so I believe that the people who chose to spend their time doing these things they care a lot more maybe than the regular general public about these issues for one reason or another.
Thanks, Marty. Okay, Atul and then Kendra.
Thank you. I appreciate this discussion because as not involved in my day job or prior day jobs with this incredibly complex subject, one of the things I'm wondering about is how do we decide who we listen to? Right now, the way we're deciding is whether they became aware of a particular survey or whether they were specifically approached and had time for it. But I wonder about how much bias there is unintentional in who we're listening to and how we're listening to those people. So just recognizing the imperfection of this process.
Yeah. Thank you, Atul. Yeah. Kendra.
Yeah, at the town hall meeting, there was a guy that was a victim of crime. His name is Jimmy Kitchens. He had $10,000 worth of tools that was stolen from him, and he is an artist, and that's his job. He makes these sculptures, and because of that theft that had occurred, he can't do his job, so he had to get a loan to try to get the tools replaced. I think it's extremely important about the victims. There are so many people out there that are victims of crime that their entire life has changed because of it, and I think it's extreme. You have lists of different people on throughout the survey of white or non-white and they're different races. Why not have about the actual people in groups that are victims? Because victims does not have a race. So there's so many different people out there that are affected by crime. Even if you're on a jury and you're listening to a criminal case, I mean, you're highly affected by what you're listening to. I can't even imagine being a victim of something so severe that your entire life is going to be changed upside down. It's extremely important to get that perspective. So this is not a biased situation. Also, I would like to have more law enforcement perspective as well, because they are out on the streets and they see what's happening, and not everything that they see is being told to the public. And they're the first responders to it all, not just police, but also EMS and fire department, because they see it all. And we are just civil, not all of us are civilians, but I am a civilian. And so I don't think I'm a professional in the field to make these opinions, because I am not the professional that's out seeing this all. So otherwise, it's a very biased perspective to try to be in their mind to figure out what's happening. I think that we need to have a bigger approach with the people that are experts in the field, rather than just our opinions and our ideologies about what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, and one of the beauties of the SAC is, I think in its design, it was intended to bring people who are working in different, both, community at large and people working within the criminal legal system to the table together. So I really want to thank everybody who is here, who's spending time having this conversation with such a mixed group. Okay, so Eve and then David, and then I'm going to help us transition to the next section.
Thanks. I apologize. I don't remember which survey or where this number came from, but I remember seeing like a large number of people who either hadn't been incarcerated or didn't know someone who had been incarcerated. And I just think that's a really important number to look at. People have opinions about the criminal legal system without actually engaging in it. Also just want to point to the fact that there are barriers for people who have been involved in the criminal legal system, not wanting to participate in these kinds of functions. And that's a really important thing to remember, that people don't, people who have been incarcerated or have gone through the criminal legal system don't trust these kinds of spaces, don't trust that their opinions will be valued. And I think that's important to keep in mind. And another demographic that I think should have been included is socioeconomic, because generally poor people are more impacted by incarceration in the criminal legal system. And yeah, I just think that would be an interesting number to see, based on who feels safe, who doesn't feel safe, based on who trusts the criminal legal system and who doesn't. Thanks.
Great, thank you. David?
Getting survey information from the jail was relatively easy because they're there and it was an easy population to get a bunch of people together. I'm wondering, are there, in addition to probably the prosecutor's office, victim advocates, maybe DVSAS, are there other concentrated organizations, et cetera, that we could survey for victims in our community? Like, if there is, I'm happy to participate in making that happen. Somebody here, I'm assuming, has their finger on the pulse of victims in Whatcom County. Hopefully you can tell us who to ask the questions.
Does anyone have a response for David on that?
We could certainly supply a list of victims and contact them ahead of time and see if they want to participate, but it's almost an endless case of people feeling that they're victimized and they're not achieving justice, and there's more focus on those that commit the crimes, that are more focused on those that commit the crime than the people that are suffering the impacts.
Right.
And I can tell I get emails every day, phone calls, there's a strong sense of that in our community.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so to summarize, I think we've I want to thank Marty for pulling all that together. That was awesome. And just really acknowledge what's been spoken to about other other input that we wish we had. And we're going to have to do, at this point with our needs assessment, work with what we've got, because we're kind of at the end of our research gathering capacity and timeline. That being said, we know we have farther to go in the coming year to really nail down stuff and move it forward, a lot of action items. And so this seems like a really, that, holding that in mind, everything that's been said about who else should be involved in the conversation. Let's shift to the next slide. Can we pop this slideshow up again? Because we have now started to look at, given the input that we've received, how does that inform our work? So we're going to now shift to the vision, values, and goals. And Michael's going to present on behalf of our committee. And then we'll have a talk about the recommendations. So Michael, are you ready?
I am, as soon as I can find the unmute button. Yes, I'm ready.
There you go.
Okay, good people. I am excited. I really do think the results are very illuminating. You have to keep in mind, almost a quarter of the respondents had personal involvement or family were involved with the criminal justice system. I think that response actually covered the broad spectrum of respondents, and it did so, and it revealed groups who didn't quite see their priorities reflected in the same way in the vision, values, and goals. And we saw some of that in the previous discussion. But I'm here to pop the champagne cork and tell you we can get this done, not by splitting the baby down the middle, but by finding a very, very, very broad path down the middle, using the survey results to analyze and revise and rebalance our vision, values, and goals. So keep in mind what Marty said. All respondents prioritize pretty much the same thing, protecting public health and safety. They all prioritize using evidence-based decision-making. They all endorse evaluating programs to see if they're working. And they all prioritize investing in incarceration, prevention, investing in community services, and behavioral health and early interventions. Folks, we have a huge, broad middle area of agreement, and almost all support a new, safer jail, one that provides in-house services and support for after jail services in the community too. Again, the area of overlap is huge, but we also miss something. half of the respondents did not feel safe in our community. And a significant portion of those are the ones who are saying the draft vision and goals do not agree with their own, either by a little or by a lot. So by looking closer at the survey results, those same respondents more strongly endorsed jail investments and law enforcement. So if they didn't find what they wanted in the vision that they were given, I think we can find ways of including it that are in complete harmony with what we've already been working on. If you look at those who do feel safe, the vision and values do align quite well already with their own values and priorities. So we have been capturing that aspect very well. And a significant portion expressed concerns about whether they would be treated fairly by the criminal legal system in Whatcom County. But those respondents more strongly endorsed what we're already including in the vision and value, that is prevention, restoration, reentry support. So, I mean, I just want to say that what we have is so close, but what did we miss? And I think what we missed, which like we kind of all assumed was there maybe, but we didn't say out loud, is that a central goal of all these efforts is to reduce crime. We actually didn't say that anywhere clearly, right? We kind of assumed it was understood, but no. What was missing was that aspect of reducing crime, which by the way, unites prevention and restoration and accountability. Right? This is not about punishment as a value or a goal, right? Accountability is a mechanism to reduce crime, right? To hold criminals accountable, hopefully so they won't ever commit crimes, or to help them so that they never get in that place in the first place. So our highest common principles that are endorsed broadly are justice and fairness, right? So we needed to include an element that we missed. And so if you look at the vision, values, and goals, we now simply say reduce crime. We make it clear. I think that was one of the elements was missing. And my guess is that the people who don't feel safe and who are looking for more jail and accountability and law enforcement support will read that word and understand that their concerns are in there also. Because keep in mind, those same people were already endorsing rehabilitation, already endorsing community services, already endorsing treatments, already endorsing reentry support, right? So I think we can get them on board too, even the ones who are dissatisfied. So I think that was the biggest, most significant change, and it was done in direct response to the survey results and to the gap that some people felt between what we had drafted and what they'd wanted to see. We also replaced the word rehabilitation with restoration. That's a bit of wordsmithing, but the rehabilitation often has a more clinical use in many regards, and restoration has been used more broadly, and it has, in a certain sense, less clinical baggage to go with it. Next slide, please. The other changes are a little bit simpler in a certain sense, not using aspirational language, saying Whatcom County is this, just confuses the heck out of people. So just say, we'll be this. In looking at the survey results, we wanted to reemphasize financial prudence as an important value in decision making, and to kind of link those together by actually kind of unifying things that are kind of go together, right? You use evidence-based programs because they're cost effective. You're spending money on the right stuff, the stuff that works. So we kind of combine that as one coherent thought. We also, again, were more specific about it, and that's a goal to avoid unnecessary pre-trial time in jail. We have talked about that a lot, but again, we didn't quite make it clear that that was one of the goals of what was going on with the diversion services. And then the goal that had to do with policy language, which just kind of went around the topic with just without stating it very clearly, that we need to analyze and change these policies if they are the thing in the way, if they're the thing that's driving. So I think the thing to do at this point is actually look at what those revisions look like in text. Holly, you're muted.
I was muted. That was excellent. We're going to, And also, I just want to make a comment that if all of you were in the room and watched Michael and Kristen like hash this stuff out, I mean, those people have a love of language and a belief in getting the words right. So it was really fun. We're going to actually now shift gears. We're going to get your feedback on the drafts. They were in your packet, but we're going to put them up on the screen. And, you know, if we need to, Michael, you can also just pop in and help people see the changes. But let's see if we're in alignment here or if we need further tweaking. So, Kathy, can you pop the screen back up, the PowerPoint, and we can look at the actual language changes? Kathy, you there? There we go. Okay, so we're going to look at the proposed revisions that came from our subcommittee. And if you're not comfortable with these, if you don't think they've captured them, then if we could please hear your suggestion for what would change. Okay, so next slide. Okay, Michael, do you want to, are you in a space you can just kind of pop out for us the key changes here?
Oh, sure. So in this, the vision statement was really long. And so it's just 2 sentences just to make it easier to read. And the important addition is in the second sentence. To accomplish this, we will reduce crime and reduce incarceration through, etc. So that was the revision I was referring to.
Yep.
Reducing crime, reducing incarceration, and thank goodness you can do both of those with the exact same efforts.
And we also got it a little more direct. I remember this. We had, do you remember it used to say, we'll be a model for da da da. We were just like, let's jump to the chase here. We're going to uphold and promote safety, health, and justice, and just kind of made it more straight up. And then you'll see the change in the term rehabilitation to restoration. So how does this work for you guys? Anything that does not feel right to you that you would like to make a different recommendation on the vision? Okay. If I don't, yeah, Scott, please go ahead.
I guess, does accountability in that top sentence, does that accountability, does that mean incarceration? Is that how we get accountability?
Yeah, look at the bottom. Each of those terms is in a certain sense defined and explained. And that includes when incarceration is called for.
Thanks.
Great. Kristen?
You know, I'm kind of appreciating where Scott is focusing, and I focused on it as well, because there's really in my mind, and I talked about this a little bit as far as maybe emphasizing more that we also use a jail. I mean, I don't know if we need to dance around that as much as we kind of are, although I see that we are saying, yes, it's called for. But there just doesn't seem, I think that it's lacking maybe a little bit more of maybe a reverence towards law enforcement itself. I don't, and I don't even really know what the answer, what the remedy to that is. And I did raise that issue earlier, but it does seem to be lacking just a little bit of that. That's all, you know.
Yeah. Thanks, Kristen. Peter?
Yeah.
Okay, I can I make a comment around all the statements at this point, Holly?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And frankly, I've just written a couple of paragraphs, so I'm just going to read them if that's okay as well. So I generally like the statements myself because they align with my worldview, but I cannot help but feel that they're so aspirational to sound a little naive. These are not the statements of a pragmatic group that represents the majority of people in this county, but rather a progressive minority, of which I'm one. The statements do not address a key goal for the responsible governance of our county for victims of crime and people exhibiting antisocial behavior, and for the vast majority of citizens, voters, and taxpayers. And it is this: in addition to the behavioral health services and incarceration prevention, we must have a jail of adequate size to make sure we do not experience booking restrictions. There have been enough space and staff. There have to be enough space and staff to hold people who need to be held. And we have seen the destructive effect on our community of these booking restrictions. The fact of the matter, as inconvenient as it might be, is that there are people who do need to be held accountable by means of incarceration. There are people who will not change their behavior or use of destructive drugs without the threat of incarceration. And I just feel like we have somehow missed something here. And it is that, and I heard a lot at the town hall, and I just don't see it being reflected here, or the experience of so many people that I've talked to throughout the county. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I guess where I'm hearing that mostly is in the, from what you're saying and what Kristen is saying, is that it doesn't feel like that accountability section, that last, everybody's following how you've got the prevention, restoration, and accountability in the broad statement, and then more definition below. But it's something about the, it's almost like, if I was going to guess, you see that we will operate facilities that are humane, well equipped, well maintained. There's something in there that just doesn't feel like it's enough capturing sort of that aspect of the criminal legal system and the facilities that are needed to, and space that is needed to pull that off.
Maybe we just need to add the word jail. Incarceration in jail. We avoid the J word.
Mm-hmm. Yep. With that, I'm just curious, and Doug, I see your hand up. I'll get to you in a sec. But if we use, I'm just curious for people, if we use the word jail in particular, do you feel like that would be helpful? Because right now we don't say jail in this. Yeah, Arlene?
Yes, I think it's a matter of respect for the people in the community who express themselves at this town hall. I agree with those of you who have been talking about this, even though the vision aligns with my personal values. I want to acknowledge and respect the needs of our community and the wishes of our community, and the reality that some people are not amenable to help and support, and people want to know that we understand this, and this has to do with the support that we need from everyone for the bill that we're going to be proposing.
Yeah.
It's very, very important to reword this carefully. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, I also am wondering if swapping in the accountability to swap the two parts of it. You see how they've got the top and then the bottom is talking about facilities. Maybe swapping those out might also make it stronger and clearer for the folks who that's a real important value for them that we're hearing. So Doug, you're up.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce that both in the town hall and here at the sheriff's office, we hear over and over again that accountability piece and how it contributes to, not having adequate jail space to hold people accountable and protect the public is something that results in people not feeling safe. So I think it's important that we emphasize that accountability piece, and that's important towards the effective administration of justice as well. So unfortunately, there's some people, in order to protect the public, need to be there. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. So I'm also hearing this kind of adequate jail space concept for accountability. So let's hear from two more people and then I'm going to make a suggestion. Yeah, but Atul?
Thank you. My question is about the word accountable. There's so much talent in this discussion, and I'm wondering if it's worth someone proposing a definition of accountable and accountability. That'd be helpful for me, because it might mean slightly different things to different people.
Okay.
But I think pinning that down would help the discussion a little bit for me. So.
And I just heard, it was interesting too, because when Doug just spoke, he used the term accountable as well. So I think maybe that's what I think this last paragraph is attempting to define. So what I'm going to do is ask for a couple more comments, and then I'm going to ask Ashley that our values and goals, vision value goals, folks get back together and rework this. So let's hear from people who haven't spoken yet. And then we're going to, well, I see 4 of you with your hands, and I want to see Michael and Kristen. Are you guys willing to take this one more time? Because I feel like we're really getting some good messaging here, or good input here, and it's going to take us some wordsmithing time. Is it, Kristen?
Absolutely. Yeah, and if there's anybody else who wants, I mean, I don't know, I'd like to invite as many diverse views as possible. I mean, that's what's going to make it the best. So
you're here. Okay, so I'm going to ask if what has already been said, if you've already heard what you're about to say, you can put your hand down, because the point has been made. If you have something new to add to the conversation, please, I would like to hear from you. Okay, so brief and new information. Go ahead, Wendy.
You might want to substitute corrections facilities versus jail, because I think what the community is looking at is something a little more widespread than a stereotypic jail.
Thank you. Beautiful. Mr. Gockley.
I would suggest what's missing is not reference to a jail or a correctional facility, but any distinction about well, first of all, to respect the opinion that Peter articulated, which I also heard in the town hall, but also to distinguish who's going toward alternatives and diversion and who's going toward the jail. So I would put it up front in that last paragraph, and not to wordsmith on the fly, but something like, to protect public safety, we recognize that certain high-risk individuals will require detention in the jail. We will also utilize a range of alternatives, blah, 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 and go on from there. But put it up front that we recognize people need to be in jail, and put it up front that we're talking about high-risk offenders. We're trying to provide alternatives where they're low risk. And I think that would clarify and acknowledge the feeling that we picked up in some community feedback.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, bro.
This has come up in previous meetings before, but I think it's really relevant to say in this meeting around, just that there might be some community education that's needed around recidivism rates with incarcerating people, and if the goal really is to reduce crime, is incarceration going to really achieve this goal of reducing crime, which I feel like is a really excellent addition to the statement. So maybe some language in there. I don't think that the revised statement has anything about evidence-based practices, but that might be a great thing to add in there, so that, if the desire is, if there's a feeling of not, if folks aren't feeling safe in this community and they want things that are actually going to work, to have that be represented in the vision statement, so that we're really evaluating the effectiveness of incarceration and other programs. And lastly, the accountability piece. If there's a desire in the community to Well, I guess, yeah, I guess I'll stop there. Thanks.
And remember, gang, we still have the values and goals. So I just want to remind you, we've got 2 other sections to go. Not to slow you down. You're doing great, but yeah, Scott, go ahead.
All right, on both prevention and restoration, I just noticed that those are the 2 that are going to cost a lot of money. We just went through a thing on child help in the community, passed it by a razor thin vote. My worry from, I guess, my seat in the park is all of these new programs suggested are going to cost a lot of money, and they're going to be unproven because a lot of them are going to be new. And what if they don't work? And what if we don't support them? I guess that's where I see something missing in terms of we have to have a jail because what we have right now isn't working. And if we can't put people who commit crimes somewhere, then we're going to be back where we're at. So I don't want to be on booking restrictions on day 1 because all these programs are going to take a while to get going.
Thank you. Okay.
The money element is missing somehow, some way.
Right. Well, we've got that in the next section. So point well taken. And let's go ahead then and shift. And then at the end of this discussion, I'm going to ask people to raise their hands if they think they would like, as Kristen said, to be involved in this last wordsmithing to really capture what we're talking about here. Okay, so we've got the revised values. We have 7 of them. And then I believe we had, I want to look, but 10 or 12 goals. So feedback on the values. You can see that we kind of tightened things up. The committee tightened things up, added the, I'm trying to think, I think we reworked number 7 quite a bit. Yeah, Kristen and
Yeah, 7 and 4, I think were they?
Yep. Yeah, Marty, go ahead. Number 3. Yep. Yeah. And that actually the last 2 comments really reflected number 3. Okay, gang. Yeah, I'm hoping number 7, we rework that. We'll get stronger support from y'all. Okay, can we keep going? Pretty good? Good enough? Okay, we're going to keep going. Now we're on to remember, we have 3 types of goals that we distinguished: the system goals, the service goals, and the facilities goals. So any feedback on the revised system goals? Okay. And notice the addition of number 3, that was somebody from SAC had also emailed just saying we have to really incorporate those findings from the Vera report. So that also got looped in there. Okay, we're going to keep going. You have to just speak up. I don't want to rush you, but jump on in.
What did you just say about the Vera report? Like what are you referring to?
Same thing we talked about at the committee meeting. Go up one, please. Just about the unnecessarily long stays in jails. It was in the Vera report. It was in the feedback, David's surveys with inmates and staff. That same finding. So we made sure to get that into the goals.
Yeah, that's okay. All right.
Okay, services goals. We've got, Marty, I have to look at the thing. Is that 3 of those or is there 2 pages of those? Let me flag. Here we go. Okay, any feedback on the ones that you see in front of you?
3 of these and then facilities goals.
Yeah, that's right. Now I can see.
I have a suggestion here for when you're talking about number 7. Instead of just start using a noun for people, use an action word for the very beginning of the sentence, and it will eliminate a lot of your wordage.
Can you say how you'd put it, Kendra? I'm not seeing it.
Instead of people released from jail have immediate access to behavioral health, just put immediate access to behavioral health, Medicare, housing, employment, and support systems for people to avoid reincarceration.
Got it. Check. Thank you. Okay, anything else on service goals? Excellent. Okay, let's go to facilities. Revised facilities goals. Here we are. Any suggestions on these? How are they sitting with you? Yeah, Michael?
Are these the only 4?
Yep.
When I read these, it doesn't to me imply outpatient facilities. It could cover it, but it doesn't really imply it. I have to work to infer that. And yet so much of this will be community-based services in connection, before, during, and after, right?
Right.
And that was the part Scott was talking about, right? Those other facilities will be equally expensive potentially.
Right. Yeah, so just by making facility plural, we didn't necessarily make it clearer. Yeah. Yeah, Peter?
I guess I have a similar concern, and it relates to the statement I read before. I'm striking the balance between aspirational and, what is actually doable is, I think, important for us. We do not want to come across as naive. Would you go back one slide, please, Kathy? So number 7 just bothers me. As much as this is the world I want to live in, the word housing and employment and support systems to avoid reincarceration, it's just so, these are the biggest problems that our entire society is dealing with, aside from climate change. And somehow we're saying this is our goal. And, I love a big goal, but I don't know, there's just something that is striking me as really a little too aspirational here. The next slide, most of these things are within our reach of our community. Anyway, that's just something I had to bring up. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's interesting because Brell had just spoken to the importance of avoiding reincarceration. So let's see if we can, look at that language one more time. Then remember that the specific recommendations are coming next, right? So this is where the rubber will meet the road. So we need to just bear that in mind. This sort of like nested boxes is what we're doing here. My question right here is any other comments here? And then I'm going to ask who would like to be invited to our next, our final wordsmithing bonanza. Okay, no final comments. Raise your hand if you would like to be invited to our next bonanza with Kristen and Michael and Deborah. Okay, so we've got Atul, Kendra, Arlene, Heather, Peter. Did I get everybody? Bill. Great. Everybody who would like to be invited, you there? Okay, I'm not going to guarantee. I just want to say right now that we're going to find a meeting time we can all be at, right? We're in holidays. We will do our best though, because you know how that reality is, but we'll try and find a time we can all meet. All right. Yay. Good job, everybody. We're going to move on. Here we go. Wendy, were you also wanting to be on that meeting in that committee, subcommittee, or you have
that would be great, but I was wondering if taking a look at this, if there could be some written information or comments or whatever that were forwarded to Kathy, and then you wouldn't necessarily need me there, but if there were some observations that might be helpful, then people could use them or not. Would that be appropriate?
Yeah, go ahead and email those in to Kathy. And Michael, actually, I was going to ask, Peter, you had written something up. If you wanted to email that to Kathy, that'd be, you're going to be at the committee, but email it anyway.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to have some emailed input, because reading it ahead of time, at least for me, gives me a chance to process it and to reconcile it with different opinions, so that by the time we get together,
it helps.
It really does. It for the way my mind processes.
For all of us. It's heavy lifting. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy.
We're going to move on then to the next subcommittee. So we missed, Eve was going to try and be part of this too, but the timing didn't work out. So this is Stephen and Teresa's work, really doing that racial equity analysis piece. Of course, you can always do more, but they did a really beautiful job of going through this. And Stephen, I'm going to turn the floor over to you so you can share what y'all came up with.
Thanks, Holly. It was a rich discussion. I really appreciated the positivity and the enthusiasm that Michael had in reporting on the vision, values, and goals. This was a little bit of a slog, a less positive thing because of historic barriers. What you see here is the set of questions that they're somewhat tweaked, but they're basically the core meaning of the racial equity toolkit that comes from the Government Alliance for Race and Equity that the county is a member of, GARE. And they are meant to sort of guide our assessment of how well we are taking account of racial equity issues and problems. Our first question was whether or not we were looking at this in terms of our process in working through the questions we worked through, or whether the actual 19 recommendations that we had for our needs and recommendations were being analyzed. We pretty quickly decided that we didn't have either the bandwidth or the information necessary to speculate about the equity issues that might be in the 19 needs and recommendations. What was really important was for us to be able to say, as we passed recommendations to the county council, that we had taken account of racial equity concerns to the extent we could. So we were really looking at our process as a group in getting to the point we're at. Next slide, Kathy. It was pretty obvious that our group did not really reflect the population composition of the county well enough. So that was an observation that fed through our recommendations or our takeaways as well. It was also clear, even though we had quite a dense series of data reports early on in our process, meetings 2 and 3, with the criminal legal data and the behavioral health SIM update data, that there's not adequate data on racial equity concerns really anywhere in the criminal legal system. So one of the questions you look at using the racial equity toolkit is, are your recommendations supported by the data on the effects or the incidents that the recommendations would have on populations that have faced racial disparities and racial inequities in the past? To be blunt, we don't know that very well. The systems have never paid adequate attention to that, and so we don't even gather the data that could answer a lot of these questions. And I think you've seen in earlier drafts that addressing that those data gaps are among our needs and recommendations going forward to the county council. But we did think that conversation and our whole series of earlier conversations in prior meetings did acknowledge a sensitivity to racial equity and a commitment to racial equity going forward. Those are commendable features of our process, and we want to encourage them as the planning process goes forward from the SAC to the council to the community as a whole in the 2023 initiative campaign. And the other takeaway is tied into the lack of adequate data. We want to make sure that we're encouraging a system that measures progress, that has the data and that can use that data to measure progress in reducing racial disparities going forward. So that should be a feature that we all have our eyes on, and the council should have its eyes on in coming months and years. So this is the proposed need and recommendation that came out of the discussion that we had. And you've had this, I won't read it for you, but it identifies the need to remedy the look of the screen here before us. We appreciated the data that TVA could get from targeted populations and the most affected stakeholder communities. We wanted those folks to be more directly involved in the decision-making for policies and practices in the future. And so our recommendation was that, we're going to be making recommendations to the county council. The county council is going to be digesting those, debating those, adopting some, maybe postponing others. In that vetting process that will come from our work, we want to strongly encourage the greater inclusion, the intentional inclusion of BIPOC and lived experience people in the development of final steps in going forward to the voting public.
Great. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. So we're actually go back up one slide, Kathy, and let's just see if there's any feedback on this proposed need and recommendation from the Racial Equity Toolkit Subcommittee. And Scott, I see your hands up.
I just want to kind of based on the previous conversations, people with lived experiences. Does that include the victims? I have a feeling not, but maybe it should.
What do other people think about that in this situation? Yeah, Heather?
I think that's a really fair point. And I expect that victims of crime who are people of color have a really different experience with the incarceration system as well. So I think that's a really good point, Mayor Cortés.
Yeah, thanks. Cliff? Cliff, you're up. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, I would just like to speak from a couple of experiences that I had as I was working as a deputy sheriff, just to give a little bit different perspective.
Okay,
both of these
Cliff, before you do you have a specific change? Because I do appreciate that, but do you have a thing that you would like to suggest changing? Because that would actually be the most helpful.
Well, I would just want to share a perspective that I saw from people that I had dealt with that were of a different race than I was. One of them called me a racist because I stopped them, but it was somebody I didn't know who it was in the car, but I stopped the car. It was somebody that I had dealt with on other occasions. And he said, "You stopped me because you're a racist." And
Okay.
I said, "Tony, you know that's not true." And his response was, "Yes, you have always treated me with respect." But his immediate reaction was, because I was a police officer, that I was racist in dealing with him. Another instance, I don't know, I'd like to share, but maybe you don't want to hear it. So I'll let it go at that.
Thank you for that. And Cliff, I'm glad you brought that up because there's actually a section there's some stuff in the next part where you see in the needs and recommendation, that kind of thing. I really would love to hear your perspective on that because it's coming up. So this is about like participation in the process. So I'm hearing adding in also victims of crime in here. And then hold that thought, Cliff, because I think we're gonna pick that thread back up. Michael?
Yeah, I'm wondering if the GARE subgroup took a look at and what they think of the results of the survey, which did break down responses by BIPOC respondents. And I think they wouldn't follow some kind of preconceptions and oversimplifications. So for example, BIPOC members also thought that rehabilitation was important, but they actually didn't think it was more important. They were in a certain sense moderate in their stances. There's one other little insight there. Oh, where was it? I'm scanning through the document. I tried to highlight it. Anyway, the point is we actually do have some evidence of what BIPOC members feel in comparison to the non-BIPOC members of our community. For example, the BIPOC respondents gave slightly less prioritization to certain aspects that had to do with addressing inequalities and discrimination, which was surprising. It wasn't that they didn't believe those were important, but they didn't prioritize those as highly as some other people do. So I'm wondering if the GARE subgroup looked at those BIPOC respondents' results and took those to heart also.
Michael, I can respond quickly to that. No, we did not. We did not have the survey results back when we met on November 29th. I certainly think it's fair to take account of that. And I'm sure Holly and Marty are open to any suggestions of how to do that. But I do want to go back to the fact that decisions are being made, recommendations are being made that will ripple out through the community as a whole for decades. BIPOC and lived experience populations are not at the table making the decisions about what those would be. And that's really where our focus was, not attitudes necessarily about the balance between restoration or fairness of the criminal legal system, but more participation in the decision-making process. And going back to 2020 critiques in the community, the common meme was nothing about us without us. And I think that's really the sort of the tone of what we're recommending as this process gets vetted further in the public domain.
Oh, I agree, Stephen, but there are BIPOC voices in that survey, so we should at least listen to those that are represented.
So let's bear that in mind then as we look at the needs and recommendations, Michael. So this is like moving forward. The recommendation here is moving forward. Let's just make sure to really intentionally include people and include people in a way that they can actually participate. Is there anybody who has further comments on this as a recommendation from the folks who did the toolkit analysis? Okay. All right. Good job, subcommittee. Well done. Thank you, Stephen. Well presented. So we're going to shift gears then. It's 11:19 and we're going to move into the suggested revisions to the system service facilities needs and recommendations. And you should have, it will probably be helpful if you click that link that came in Kathy's email this morning, so you can see the track change of those. Marty is going to actually share screen. And what we'd like to do again is focus on as much as you can specific, like word changes, things that you think will make them stronger. If you see obvious gaps, stuff like that. We're going to try, today is the day we're going to really try to get as much as far as we can. So we're not necessarily going to go in order. What I'd like you to do, I'd like you to invite you to do, is go to where you feel the strongest, like where places that you just are not feeling satisfied. And I would especially love to hear, to start, from people who have not spoken yet. So Mary Lou and Maya and who else? I'm going to scan my list, and Harriet. And who else is here who we haven't heard from? Kara and Stark. What do you guys think? Do you love them? Barry, you're here too. Great. What do you guys think? Okay, so not hearing from folks who haven't spoken yet. Go ahead, Kristen.
So we're going just off of anything in here?
Yep, we're gonna try and hit the things that are hit. We're gonna try and address.
Well, you know, for the reducing the number of people detained in jail before trial or in other case resolution. For the recommendations, I didn't see here anywhere as some sort of a recommendation to beef up the services of the public defender's office. And I wrote it down here just as far as in recommendations to solve the problems here, that's an important factor. We did have, I think, an optional meeting a few months ago where Stark and others from the public defender's office did come in and talk about some programs where they can work directly with their clients. And I think that could at least be explored and put here somewhere in these recommendations, that those resources just need to be, I think the public defenders need to be really beefed up here before, during, and after this jail project, you know, in this system. So could be included somewhere, is what I'm saying.
Do Stark and Maya want to comment on that or be more specific about what that looks like?
Sure. You know, we've been looking at some alternative ways to approach what we do. And I think in general, it's sort of a move towards a more holistic approach to defense work, where it's not just all based on getting a case and preparing it for trial and so on and so forth. We want to move it more in a direction of engaging people in service community and transitioning them from the jail to housing, and, you know, basically the whole gamut. And we've looked at a couple different solutions to that. One was we had sought a couple extra behavioral health specialist positions. We have 2 currently. And I learned just this week that one of them, at least, if not both of them, are feeling terribly overwhelmed with the workload in our office. We weren't able to bring that about in our budget request this year, but I think that there's going to be a look at it ongoing, and that may be implemented at some point in the future. The other thing that we looked at and talked about was a private organization called Partners for Justice that, you know, are I guess the best phrase for them would be a navigator or a facilitator, but basically that would involve the county entering into a contract with this nonprofit organization to house a couple folks in our office that would, you know, really approach our clients, and particularly the ones in jail, in a very encompassing fashion. You know, when we met with them, and we met with some organizations that are using them, one of the example that sort of stuck out to me was these people even assist in things like, you know, getting their dog out of the Humane Society for them, so they don't lose their dog while they're in jail. And I mean, I don't point to that specifically, but, you know, that is sort of the universal service that Partners for Justice would possibly provide to us. As I've said before, you know, that, you know, to me, reduction of numbers is the key. It's the key to our office. It's the key to the prosecutor's office. It's the key to the jail. And if we can somehow bring the numbers down, it dramatically affects all of the county organizations and municipal organizations that are engaged in this. And you know, frankly, it helps the victims of crime too, because if the numbers come down, there are less victims, there are less crimes being committed, and you know, that's the approach that we're advocating. And, you know, and I think that essentially reflects a realization that, you know, what we've been doing over the last, you know, however many decades, you know, hasn't been working very well. And I had to kind of resist the temptation to engage in the accountability discussion that was going on earlier, because, you know, frankly, I'm not so sure how excited people are to hear my perspective on accountability. But I can tell you, as sure as I sit here, that, you know, there are people that belong in jail that need to be segregated from society to keep society safe. But B, the idea that a little bit of jail time is going to change anything is absurd. You know, we did that with low-level drug possession cases for decades, and we gave people 30, 60, 90, 120, you know, however many days in jail, and it affected nothing. I mean, they were high the minute they got back on the street, and there was no accountability. It was just it accomplished nothing. And I think that the direction that I would like to take our office in is a different direction, to simply incarcerating people and try to bring the numbers down with change. And so that's what we propose. I'm all for beefing up our services, but I think they ought to be beefed up in a little bit more progressive fashion than simply just giving us more attorneys or more investigators and, you know, telling us to take more cases to trial. I don't think that's really the solution.
Thank you, Stark. Okay, Lisa, would you like to chime in here?
Yeah, thank you. I would also add that I think we need to, on the other end, see more diversion from the prosecutor's side. You know, there's a statute, RCW 1031-110, that allows the diversion for mental health and substance use. And that statute was sort of to take the place of what happened when Blake passed, when the possession charges were dissolved. And no, the community hasn't really taken steps to create or follow through with that diversion program or the possibilities there. And I think that's a really wasted opportunity. Additionally, RCW 1077, which deals with competency, allows for a prosecutor diversion program for folks involved in the competency process. And we also don't have a program that does that. So those are two areas that I think really need attention. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Marty, do you want Lisa to say those statutes again right now? Would that be helpful? Okay, we'll keep
Sure.
going.
No,
we'll get it off the tape after. Good.
Great.
So Kendra, you're up next.
Yeah, well, one thing just to reiterate that finding people who want to work at the public defender's office is difficult, and positions are open and they're not able to be filled. Next part, on your chart, you have in recommendations in red about the cash-based risk. We talked about that in the last SAC meeting. Well, briefly, it was kind of snuck in, and the Viera Institute pushes that on their website. However, when speaking to somebody that's in the field, I learned that the cash is actually better for offenders with felony charges, because a bond, if you have a $25,000 bond, they'll take 10% of that. If you have a cash base for $25,000, then you get all your money back. So with a cash base, you get all of it back. Without the cash base, then you're going to be losing 10% of your money. So if money is an issue, you want 100% return, not 90% return. So the idea of this red highlighted area for recommendation, it was mentioned, it was pushed real quick by one of the SAC members, and then we were going to discuss it. So the recommendation on here, we didn't really discuss that. So why is that on for the recommendation? That's my question.
Why don't we, I think maybe, do you have, you know, it has to do with the bail system, and we were kind of getting into that. Do you have a different way of framing it that makes sense to you, Kendra?
Oh, I have a lot of recommendations. Would you like me to send the whole email? Would that be helpful?
The one that you already sent?
Well, no. Oh, I can send more. Yeah.
Yeah, so please feel free. If you had a specific suggestion on this one, I was just going to invite that opportunity. Otherwise, your email would be great.
Thank you.
Okay, so who's next? We have Cliff. Go ahead.
I would just like to quickly just dispute what Stark said about accomplishes nothing. Those people that are incarcerated for a period of time, they're off the streets and they're not committing crime because that's how they get their drugs. So you can't say it accomplishes nothing.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Perry, you're up.
Yeah, good morning. I wanted to add just a little bit of information to what Maya was sharing, just to bring people up to speed. And our Crisis Stabilization Center actually has achieved certification, state certification for 12-hour law enforcement holds, which is made reference to in RCW 1031-110 is why I'm actually bringing it up. Maya, of course, is accurate in terms of alternatives to arrest and additional diversion options. And so I just wanted to bring that piece into place. We're communicating with the prosecutor's office and certainly are going to bring additional information as we're putting together the protocols and procedures for the 12-hour law enforcement holds in lieu of jail or or other consequences. So just wanted to bring that piece of information more current.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, Arby, you're up.
Yeah, I'd like to very quickly read what I posted up to the Stakeholder Advisory Committee website about this issue of bail reform, cash bail reform. Now, this part comes from page 26 of the SAC's drafts needs assessment, so the work that we're doing. The Vera Institute found pretrial defendants comprised nearly 60% of the jail population in 2016. Currently, an estimated 98% of the jail population is not fully sentenced and is awaiting trial on any given day. 64% of the respondents to the jail inmate survey indicate that their time in jail was longer because they were unable to pay bail. With expanded options for pretrial defendants and or bail reform, the size of this group could be safely reduced. Again, that was from the Vera Institute. And that's why what I asked was I respectfully request the Stakeholder Advisory Committee for the Justice Project add to the SAC's final recommendations the Vera Institute's bail reform recommendations, specifically risk-based assessment of pretrial defendants as an alternative to bail. Specifically, and this is a quote from the 2017 report to Whatcom County stakeholders on jail reduction strategies. Quote, Whatcom County should shift from a cash-based to risk-based pretrial justice system that provides for individualized release decisions informed by validated risk assessment instruments and a range of pretrial release and supervision options. This is considered best practice in the field. I think given where we are now, we were told 5 years ago that was best practice, and yet, here we are with booking restrictions. Again, maybe this is a conversation that needs to be had at length with this group, but I personally see no valid reason that for two people who commit the same exact crime, and one person goes to jail and one person goes home, and the only reason was because the person who went to jail couldn't afford to go home. We have an issue with the jail that is full, and we need to have room for people who really need to be there. And ending cash bail does not adversely affect public safety. So I really would encourage our group to see this as an opportunity to do something that I personally believe is the morally correct thing to do. People shouldn't be in jail just because they can't afford not to be. Thanks.
Thank you. So it sounds like, in concept, in what we're trying to incorporate this into our report in some way, and the needs and recommendations, as you'll see here. And Arby, we got that feedback, and I think that we're working on incorporating that piece into the needs assessment. Is there anybody who has a strong opinion opposing what's being suggested? We don't have the language right. I want to recognize that, but is there anybody who's like, no, this is not we're going with the direction of the Vera report and kind of dusting that off and bringing it home? Is there anybody who has a strong opinion otherwise? Strong opinion otherwise. So Michael or Bill, do you have a strong opinion otherwise?
No, it's a different comment on bail.
I'm sorry. I don't have a strong opinion, but I was just going to point to the Rules of Criminal Procedure 3.2. There is a presumption that people should be released without bail unless there's other conditions that require bail.
Okay.
Specific findings. So there's already, I know the majority of the people are released probably without bail as it is now, but
Okay.
certainly it might require a change in those rules. That's all.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. So again, we're just on this point. Anybody else? Otherwise, we're going to shift. Okay, Michael, thank you guys. That was excellent. Michael, you're up.
I'm hearing cash bail understood in two different ways. One, I think cash bail is used just to mean bail. People are using cash bail as if it's an exact synonym, money to get out of jail. But what I heard in the earlier comment had to do with the distinction between putting up cash and using a bail bondsman. I don't think most people are thinking that when they use the word cash bail. They're not in favor of bail bondsmen, right? They don't want to get rid of all paying in all cash and instead support bail bondsmen. I don't think that's what is meant. So I think the term cash bail is introducing an issue that is not part of the discussion by most people and is not what Vera was referring to. They're not referring to the mechanism by which bail is paid, but by the idea of bail itself. As Bill said, the presumption is that people shall be released on personal recognizance unless shown otherwise. And then the absurd logic is that by paying $100, you're somehow safe, right? The bail has a logical flaw in it.
Got it.
You're safe or you're not. And a risk-based system doesn't have that logical flaw.
Yep. Well spoken. And I saw a thumbs up from Kendra too when she flagged this for discussion. So Kendra, thank you for bringing that forward. Okay, are we ready for other things in the report? Yeah. Let's see. Cliff, was that from before? Or do you have your hand up for another point?
Yeah, I would. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah. For
okay.
Sure.
I would just like to say, and I don't have an answer for this, but I know that there are some people that couldn't afford bail, but they have committed a crime intentionally so they can get into jail. So they have meals, they have medical care, and they have a place to sleep. And I've seen that when I worked in the jail. There was several people that would do that. And if they got let out, they'd go out and commit other crimes to get back in. So I just want to suggest that we be careful on how we word that.
Yeah, and that kind of gets to that point about what are the other systems in our community that make it so that doesn't happen at all. That jail is never like something someone would want to do or need to do because they didn't have enough food or a place to stay. Yeah, I appreciate that, Cliff. Okay, how about any other spot? I'm relying on you to be looking at your email and clicking on that link and going through if there's any other things in these. I know that Marty in particular and others on the planning committee have worked really hard to try and take what we've gotten so far and rework these needs and recommendations to match what we're hearing from you all. Yeah, Harriet, please.
Toggling between screens here. Going on down this set of needs and recommendations.
Yep.
Can you specify the number and letter from the left?
Yeah, I'm about to. The 2G on increasing the capacity for the PACT programs. The recommendation, that the revised recommendation, I actually like the original language better. The revised recommendation says support providers. What does that mean? Like how? It seems to me that the set of recommendations is getting very specific about what this group thinks needs to happen. And that seems like a step back into more generic kinds of language. So I really like the increased tax services. Like bottom line, that's what we're paying. So I would recommend going back to that.
To the original.
Yeah.
Marty, do you remember what
I-
was
I-
the
I
rationale?
do have one, and Perry can help me with this too. This original said PACT services dedicated to incarcerated individuals. And we were thinking that actually PACT services as a prevention effort for people who are at risk of incarceration was important too, not just when. This makes it sound like, you know, it's when people are in jail or prior to. So we wanted
well,
it
then
to
I
include
would,
people who weren't in jail.
all right, so
Yeah.
then I would suggest just including that language in the original, leaving the increased PACT services as is, and add the other language in.
Yep, that makes sense. Marty, did you catch that?
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
I have a generic question, if I might.
Yes, please.
And maybe I haven't, and or the group hasn't gotten far enough along in the report there yet, but it seemed to me that there needs to be a connection between the goals that we've agreed upon and then the recommendations. Or somehow connecting the goals with the needs and recommendations more specifically in the way that you implied earlier, that this is a kind of a cascading set of notions. Because the way it sits now, it's hard to make the connection from the goal to what the recommendation is to achieve the goals. Just my thought is might be a big shift in the structure of this, but
We actually we started in on that where it goes there's the need, recommendation, intended outcomes, and goals kind of going across. Do you think that would be a good idea to try and present it that way?
I would start with the goal myself.
Start with the goal. Okay.
You know, you guys, you're doing this, but I will start with the goal and then the need and then the recommendation in that order across a spreadsheet. But I write documents differently, so.
Thank you for that. That's a great suggestion. And if you have more like that, Harriet, email it over, because yeah, if you got an eye for that, so helpful.
Really. I do think really logically and in kind of outline form. So I'd be glad to send you, kind of a template of what I think it would be helpful for it to look like. So
thank you.
Yeah.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, David.
One of the areas that I'm not sure that we've covered adequately in this process, but that I hear an incredible amount of pushback and frustration about all these projects, is around finances, which is definitely way outside my own area of expertise. But that said, I would think that there is a need to collect data on the cost of incarceration, the cost of some of the treatment programs, and develop a way or pay for some analysis about how much we spend or save using the various methods, especially as we move forward, so that if we apply for grants, so that if we want to fund something, and so that the voters know, if I pay for this, then I'm reducing that, or if I increase this, I'm reducing that. Like, we have to know the value of the money we're spending. Mostly because, I mean, a lot of the feedback I hear in the community when I'm talking about it is frustration about how money has been spent or how it would be spent, and just some transparency and analysis around that may go a long way. I don't articulate it that okay, but
Thank you. Great suggestion. Yeah. Yeah, and it would really beef up that kind of prudency. We have that goal someplace, wherever it is, around, prudent financial management, and it would really support that. Harry, did you have another comment? Your hand's still up, but I think maybe, yeah. Okay, Perry, you're up.
Yeah, Marty, on 1G, the proposed addition. To Peter's, earlier point, my thought certainly is that in terms of, let's see, BIPOC communities and people with lived experience with incarceration, personal or family member, and victims of crime, It seems that this, I was really struck by the discussion, and so this would seem applicable in this setting and possibly in the recommendation language below as well.
Thanks, Perry. We'll get that in there.
Thanks.
Great. Okay. So other things that people are noticing, seeing, feel like needs more discussion, feels like it's missing or it's just not right. Okay. Well, gang, I'm going to say that first of all, I just want to reflect how hard people have been working on this, and just like, I think from a good part of our meeting, we've had 39 people. There was one point where I think we had 40 as well. And I just am so thankful to you all for showing up. This process is really, I feel like people have really put their intelligence and their heart in it. And so as we round the bend here, here's what I'm going to ask is that if you can, please look at these one more time. If you have any other things that you want to say, we need to get them like ASAP, because Jennifer has got to get this report, and we do not, because we love Jennifer, we do not want her to be typing over the Christmas, during Christmas, right? So that means we really need you to make your final comments ASAP, like this week or early next week, if you can. Like any other things that you're like, oh, here's a different idea for some wording, or here's some more facts you should understand. Here's something I'm seeing in the report. I really just would ask, request, encourage you to get that ASAP.
Who could we send them to?
That
Kathy
was
Elka?
my question too. Kathy, I was trying to text you this question. Where do you want them to you or the main SAC email?
Please just go ahead and email the SAC email, sac@co.whatcom.wa.us. Thanks.
And one thing I'm going to make a request or a suggestion on is when you send your feedback, gang, it is to the degree that you can well, let me give you, here's one thing I learned. I had a friend who was a really good advocate, and he said, write everything you have to say and then get rid of all of your adjectives. And the point of that is that when you get really excited about stuff and put strong language in all caps, and like then we, the recipients, have to sort through all that. And it will be really helpful if just try and make it as clear and neutral and specific as you can. So, I mean, that's what I do. I type something and I have a lot of feeling. You could probably guess I have a lot of feelings as a person. And then I go back through and I just try and make it as clean as possible so that the recipient can just work with my content. So, friendly suggestion to make our lives easier. Okay, so let's go to the final slide. All right. We are also going to go to the IPRTF meeting and get their feedback on all this stuff. So we've got all that. We're going to be working on revising the stuff we talked about today. You guys did great, really insightful comments. We're going to, when we've got it all together, we're going to doing our very best to, again, find that middle path or thread this needle. We're going to be doing a final survey of you all in early January. So be watching for that survey because that'll be attached to the report. Then we'll be reviewing the full report mid-January at that time and doing the final voting at the January 19th SAC meeting. So, you know, the goal is not consensus here. The goal is to get as much unity as we can. That we're really focusing on what matters, and we're trying to find that middle path and make sure everybody's really getting honored. Then we've got the IPRTF, the Law and Justice Council will also be doing this kind of a parallel process to the SAC with, do they approve this or what's their level of agreement? And then we'll be presenting to County Council on February 7th. We'll probably, if you imagine yourself wanting to help with that presentation, please let us know. We want to make sure we've really got our ducks in a row for that. And in addition to these next steps, I've already mentioned, if you have any further comments, to email those to the general SAC email. And for everybody who said they'd be willing to work on the vision, values, and goals, one more shot with feeling. We'll send out a doodle poll ASAP to see if we can get that scheduled. Okay. And remember, just your name on the report does not mean that you 100% endorse every single word. It means you were that you participated in good faith. That's what it means. So, we're not all going to agree on every single thing, but your participation, again, what in my observation has been heartful and thoughtful. And I think we've really got some incredibly good content here. So that's my thought. All right, any closing comments before we finish up? Yeah, and Carl, I got your comment in the Q&A. Please distinguish accountability from punishment. They need not be synonymous. I think, yeah, they are not synonymous, right? Good point. All right, anything else? Closing comments? Okay. Excellent work, Barry. I think we're ready for you to bring it home.
Yeah, thanks everybody again so much, and I hope you have a great next few weeks with your families over the holidays. And David, I want to say you have the coolest either filter. It looks like 1964, 65 on the cusp of color TV, kind of in between black and white and color. It's kind of cool. So anyway, thanks a lot, and y'all have a great time with your families. And we're adjourned.
Thank you all.